Hello everybody. Here in my Ohio garden, things are slowing down a bit as I move into the chillier months of fall. You can probably see behind me some of my plants that have already been hit by the frost. But I find that right now is the perfect time to take stock of my gardening supplies, figure out what I have and what I need for next year. Now, I've had so many questions on different videos about the specific gardening supplies that I use that I wanted to share today my must-have gardening supplies, the ones that I turn to every single season. Be sure to also check out my videos on my top 3 gardening tools, as well as the top 3 tools that I use to preserve my harvest. And I've linked those videos in the video description below. But today, my must-have gardening supplies. Now, my first must-have supply is insect netting. Now, I've talked about this one in other videos, but this has truly been a game changer in my garden. I used to use that thin white woven fabric insect cover, and it worked okay, but I never loved it because I couldn't see through it. So to see how my plants were doing underneath, I'd have to get down on the ground, pull up the pins and stick my head under the cover. And I never felt like it let enough air flow through. Well, a few years back, I happened upon a mesh insect netting from Gardenport, which used to be called Ag Fabric, and decided to give it a shot in my garden. My primary use at that point was to keep the cabbage butterflies off of my brassicas. Cabbage butterflies, if you're not familiar, lay eggs that hatch into cabbage worms, the notorious enemy of all brassica crops. And I have a major problem with them here in my garden. So I tried out this netting and it worked great. I loved it because it was easy to see through, it let plenty of air and water and light through, and it did an excellent job keeping the cabbage butterflies off. And as time has gone on, I have found so many other applications for it in the garden. Now I use it to keep some animal pests from my crops, so keeps away things like rabbits and squirrels and chipmunks. It also does a great job keeping cucumber beetles and squash vine borers off my cucurbit crops. The netting is UV stabilized, and like I said, if you look closely, it is a woven mesh netting rather than cloth, which easily lets water and air flow through. I typically opt for the 8-foot or 6.5-foot wide netting, but it comes in a whole range of sizes, even customizable pre-cut sections. So you can find whatever size works best for your particular garden layout. Another find from Gardenport was their frost cloth. The frost cloth that I used to use seemed like it started to disintegrate after a season of use in the garden, and sometimes I felt like I was having to double up on it just to get decent protection from the cold. I now use the 1.5 ounce heavyweight frost cloth from Gardenport for my early spring and late season veggies, even sometimes overwintering some of my very cold hardy crops underneath this frost cover. I like their 7 by 25 foot or 10 by 50 foot sized cloth. But again, this one comes in a whole range of sizes and can also be custom cut. It offers 50% light transmission, which seems to be plenty for my cool season veggies, and cold protection down to 22 degrees Fahrenheit. I noticed that they offer an even heavier weight version, up to 2 ounces, but the 1.5 ounce seems to do just fine for all of my needs in the garden. Now, with both the insect netting and the frost cloth, I like using wire hoops underneath for support. For this, I opt for wire hoops from Agricultural Solutions, and I use the 76-inch size. I have some of the 54-inch size as well, and I use those once in a while, especially for short-statured plants like lettuces, but I find myself reaching for the larger size most often. These are smooth galvanized number 10 gauge steel wire cut to a 76-inch length, which I simply insert each side into the ground about 6 inches deep, and I space them about 5 feet apart. You can adjust that spacing however you see fit. And these could be used really well with shade cloth also. Now, it's worth mentioning that you could also just purchase galvanized steel wire and cut it to your own desired length. Agricultural Solutions does sell this wire in 500-foot hoops for this purpose as well. Another must-have in the garden, you might have guessed it, good boots. Of course, every gardener needs a dependable pair of work boots. And while it's unusually dry here right now, usually about mid-fall through early summer, I have to have a good waterproof pair of gardening boots because it is just pure muck out here. For years, I've been looking for something to replace my good old muck boots. They're great in the middle of winter, but they're awfully heavy and clunky and hot to be wearing all day gardening, especially when the temperatures are anywhere above 40 degrees, which is why I was really happy to find Hi-C gardening boots. Now, these are every bit as waterproof and durable as my old muck boots, but much more comfortable to wear. They're lighter weight, they have a breathable lining, and they're comfort rated for temperatures between 14 degrees Fahrenheit and 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So I can pretty much wear them all year round here. And if the muck gets too messy, I can just spray them off with a garden hose. Throw in the fact that Hi-C offers a 100-year warranty on all of their products, and it's hard to beat these boots. Now, if you are in need of a good pair of gardening boots, click on the link in the video description below and use my code Jenna12 for 12% off your order at Hi-C. Now, perhaps I should have put this at number 1 on my list, but fencing is a must-have for me. Now, we do have plenty of deer that wander through the backyard, and this 5-foot fence is not going to do anything to stop a hungry deer. From what I've been told, you want at least an 8-foot fence if deer are a problem. But, knock on wood, I've never had any issue with deer jumping over this fence to get into my garden. What this fence does is actually protect the garden more from those little pests, things like rabbits and groundhogs, which I have huge problems with here. To create some durable yet affordable fencing, we opted for 5-foot welded wire fencing, which typically comes in 50 to 100-foot rolls. It's constructed of galvanized steel wire with 2-inch by 4-inch rectangular openings. This we affixed to T-post with wire ties, the T-post being spaced 4 feet apart. Now, as you can probably imagine, a rabbit can easily fit through these 2 by 4-inch openings. So for another level of protection, I opted for a layer of 2-foot chicken wire all along the bottom of this fence, which I secured in place with zip ties. I originally tried to go the cheaper route with plastic chicken fencing down here, only to find that rabbits easily chew through that material. So I had to redo everything with wire. Now, if you're starting from scratch, I've been told that it's best practice to bury a portion of your fence if you really want to stop those critters from getting into your garden. I didn't do this. I just made sure to leave a little bit of an overhang with the chicken wire, and that seems to have prevented the rabbits and the groundhogs thus far. Now, chipmunks and squirrels still completely run amok in my garden, but they don't wreak so much havoc that I've had to take defensive measures yet. A grow light stand is a definite must-have for me. While there are things I would change about the one I have, I would not be without an indoor grow light setup of some sort for starting seeds indoors. The stand I currently have was a hand-me-down, but I believe it's this 3-tier 12-tray grow light plant stand carried by Harris Seeds, which has T8 fluorescent lights. I talk about my different grow light setups in more detail in the video linked above, but I really like this stacked setup because I can fit more trays in less space. Natural fertilizers are another must-have in my garden. While I strive to someday make my soil so healthy and fertile that I don't even need any fertilizer, right now that's still a work in progress. When I feed my plants now, I rely on fertilizers that are derived from natural ingredients. For years, I've used the plant foods from Gurney's Seed and Nursery Company and Gardens Alive with great results. Their formulations rely on ingredients such as bone, blood, and kelp meal, alfalfa meal, humic acid, molasses, and bat guano. These formulas are quite low in their NPK ratios, typically around 3-4-3 or 4-5-4, so I don't have to worry about burning up tender young seedlings. Plus, the natural ingredients, in particular things like molasses and the chitin that is in kelp meal, help to feed beneficial soil microbes as well. One of the biggest mistakes I made when I first started my own gardens, before I had improved the soil, was thinking that I didn't need to supplement my plants in any way. Now I typically provide my plants with a dose of plant food anytime that I'm transplanting, and sometimes I'll give them a little extra supplemental feed throughout the season if I think they look like they need it. Now, related to this is a source for clean manure. Aged and composted animal manures have really been beneficial to my gardens. Manure can be a great source of nitrogen, and like the ingredients I mentioned earlier, can also help feed soil microbes in addition to my plants. I heavily rely on cow manure because it's a readily available resource with plenty of farms around here raising cattle. But I also use all of my own chicken manure, as well as using horse, rabbit, or sheep manure if it's available. The key with manure is finding sources with animals that have not been fed from hay or foraged on pasture, which has been treated with persistent herbicides, which can travel all the way through an animal's digestive tract and come out effective on the other end. So if you use that manure on your gardens, it's gonna kill your plants. And my final must-have supply is natural mulches. While those aren't necessarily something you'd go out and buy, they are, for me, critical to having a successful garden. Grass clippings, leaf mulch, wood chips, alfalfa hay, these are the things that I rely on most heavily. But really, it's about finding and utilizing the natural resources that are plentiful in your area. Natural mulches work to suppress weeds, retain soil moisture, keep plant roots cool, and as they disintegrate, add valuable organic matter to the soil. They can also provide safety and cover for beneficial predatory insects and arachnids like wolf spiders. While I have heard from folks that the use of mulch can encourage certain not so desirable bugs, the infamous slug being one of them, I find that the benefits far outweigh any negative aspects of using natural mulches in my garden. Now, let me hear from you guys. What have I missed? What are some must-have gardening supplies that you use in your own gardens? Drop a line in the comments below and let me know. And if you found today's video helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel, Growfully with Jenna. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.